This is my introduction to Sailing Wilson on YouTube. I'm Captain Wannabe Ian. Yes, I do have a sailing certificate. In fact, I have two. Whether I can sail or not is another story. I own a 2013 Island Spirit catamaran, 38 foot in length, and I really love my boat. I'm sure you've heard this before, but please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and push on the notification bell. That'd help a lot. By the way, please share my videos with other people you know. I'm currently on the hard stand at Reback Island Shipyard, which is in the top middle of the photograph. Reback Island is a resort island just off the main island of Langkawi in Malaysia. Here's a Google Earth image of my boat just beside the blue dot on the hard stand. And here's a photograph of my boat just after I finished putting the copper coat on. I've still got a lot of work to do. We were back to Langkawi Island and back to work after we did a visa run to Phuket and back. And we began by doing a number of jobs, including removing the forward windows and top hatches, and we used my trusty 6 horsepower air compressor to do most of the work. A great investment. We removed the top hatches, and because they were leaking, they weren't a serious leak, but they were leaking, and we couldn't identify where the leak was coming from until we pulled it off and found. The other thing we did was to remove the front windows and all the rubber seals that were perforated and were no good. And we employed a young bloke called Wan Chai to help us because I'd injured my left hip and knee badly. So the windows came off and the solar panels came off, and here are the windows laying on the trampoline of the foredeck. So we began the process of sanding off the top deck, and we found that there was little nipples on the non-skid nipples that if we sanded too much would penetrate through the thin layer of fiberglass and into the foam core, which made things really difficult. So we had to change the way we did things. So we just lightly sanded and roughed up the top surface to get a gripping area for the epoxy. After 8 hours work every day for a week, I made sure I went to the pool for a relax and a swim. The next day we began the process of epoxying and sealing the top deck because the thin layer of deck was porous and that's where the water was getting in. We filled in the solar panel holes and put in the woven mat and patted it down and just made it as smooth as we possibly could, and that took some time because I hadn't done it for 40 years. Then we laid a full layer of double bias matting and wetted it down and laid the matting and then epoxied across the top of it, and it turned out rather well. You can see the high spots where the original nipples was raised off the surface of the deck, and that made it difficult to get a smooth flat finish, and we had to use filler. We used a local Malaysian product called Cosfill. This is where the lack of experience showed up, and it meant that we had to do a lot more sanding. But I've heard from other people that you can lay 100% of filler and you'll still end up sanding off 80% of it to get it right. We still didn't get it right, but we worked at it with the 2 different sanders and got it as smooth as we could, ready for the grey primer. And you can see me running my hand across it to check the surface to my satisfaction and vacuumed off the dust afterwards. We then put 2 coats of grey primer on, but before that we built a sort of a dam wall out of a 1/4 inch PVC pipe across the width of the 2 sides of the upper deck, and the idea behind that is to let the water run off to the side and away from the windows, the front hatches, which let air ventilation through, but unfortunately in bad weather the rain gets in, is forced into the galley area of the boat. So you can see that we used the 3/4 inch PVC pipe and then put a double bias woven mat over the top of that to seal it in place, and it turned out reasonably well. Still a little bit of a rough job. Then we went ahead and put the grey primer on, 2 coats of the grey primer, and each coat we sanded it back just a little bit to get the gripping surface. You see in this corner where I left the inside of the pipe open so the water could run off, and there was a reason behind that, because later on I drilled holes in the front of the pipe so that the water would not only build up against the dam wall, but go into the holes and then run off to the side. And you can see, looking back on this image, it's turned out reasonably well on both sides. Still a few issues with inexperience and a little bit of a rough job. That's what you get for being an amateur and on a budget. But the final finish turned out okay, and I'm reasonably happy with it. It's not a professional job, but it's still effective. And after the grey primer, we painted on 2 coats of white top coat, and we sanded it back a little bit each time to rough up the surface. And this is after we'd finished doing that. And you'll notice the pillow, because my knee injury was still playing up rather badly, and it's even now it's still sore. So this was ready for the Kiwi grip. I must say that I really love this Kiwi grip. It hides all the blemishes and it's effective. Here's my wife taping off the area to get some design or system in place, and there's a reason for that, because in 30 degrees and 35 degrees heat you need to do section at a time so that it doesn't go off quickly, and that's the big problem with laying thick products like this. Here's the Kiwi grip in its retail box. Comes in this thick paste in a plastic container, very well presented and very professional, and this rather large roller. We thinned it out with 10% water and poured the water into a mixing container, and then went ahead and squeezed in the Kiwi grip paste into the container and stirred her up. And we did that in stages because it was so thick that it was a good idea to do half of it and then stir it up and then add the other half. So that turned out rather well. When you're paying so much money for this stuff, after all it's just thick paint. It's just logical to squeeze every bit out of the container. So I finished off that 1 litre package into the 1 litre bucket, if you want to call it anything, and we began the process of rolling it on section by section. And it's a learning process when you do it, and getting it on fairly quickly. 1 litre did one side of the roof, the upper deck, and the amount of pressure you put onto the roller depends on how much roughness you get out of the finished job. And you've got to also remember that once it settles down, you've got to do your final roll to the height of the rough surface that you want. Otherwise, if you leave it too late, you just can't fix the problem. So here we go with a finished product of Kiwi grip onto the deck. It doesn't look that great in this image, but you can see the effectiveness of taping off the area and having some kind of design Here's a better image with the shade of the tent, showing the high gloss and the Kiwi grip panels that we painted on. Overall, I was very happy with what we did. The video was produced by myself. It's the end of another exciting video of our top deck leak repair and painting. Our haul out progress report so far, part 32.